Ken Trahan with Lenny Vangilder. It's our First NBC Bank weekend preview brought to you by First NBC Bank with 35 locations throughout Southeast Louisiana and the Florida Panhandle. That's First NBC Bank, proud sponsor of SportsNOLA.com. High school football jamboree action started last night, Thursday night, with quite a few jamborees. And, of course, here locally, a couple of note, the Kiwanis Jamboree in Metairie and the Hahnville Jamboree, in which defending state champion Jesuit was impressive with a 17-0 win over Hahnville and Lenny. Just a boatload of jamborees tonight all throughout South Louisiana and really throughout the state. And I'll be at the West Bank Optimist Jamboree, a tradition on the West Bank. Been doing it for 11 years. 6 schools, 3 games, long day and night, but it's fun, and we look forward to it.
Yeah, it's here. It is finally here. Yeah, the Jamboree is essentially the preseason of high school football. You're not going to see full games. You're going to see some teams play beyond their starters, get into the second, perhaps their third teams to give a look at some guys. But it's the last tune-up before it starts for real next week. And look, they're in uniforms and in stadiums, and this is as close to the real thing as you will get until it really starts next weekend.
West Bank Optimist Jamboree on WGSO 990 AM, WGSO.com. 4 o'clock, it's Helen Cox and Thomas Jefferson. 6 p.m., Higgins and West Jefferson. The nightcap with Shaw and Errett should be good. Look forward to it. Of course, the New Orleans Saints moving into week 3 of the preseason against the Houston Texans. Sunday at 3 p.m. in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. A lot of starters playing more minutes in this game, if you will, because it's week 3 of the preseason. The problem with that is a lot of prospective starters and contributors are still not going to dress.
Yeah, you got to work through those things and, figure out just how much you're going to play. It's what's interesting to me is it seems like there's this league-wide approach out there to do less and less in the preseason with your best players. I know you brought this up on the radio the other day that it was a given when you got to the third game of the preseason, you played 3 quarters once upon a time. You even played, into that first series of the second half. You wanted to be able to come out after halftime and play one series. Now you might, like I say, you might see them a half. You might not even see them the whole first half. They may come out at some point, midway late in the second quarter. So, and a lot of that will be on a case-by-case basis. But, now, this is your last shot because week 4, when the Saints go to Green Bay next Thursday night, you could probably count the number of starters you see in that game on one hand.
The Saints also practicing at Yulman Stadium tonight on the campus of Tulane University, and why not? Curtis Johnson and the Tulane team always practicing at the Saints indoor facility, and Tom Benson, a generous benefactor of Yulman Stadium. The only downside of this is, why can't you play a high school game or 2 there? You're going to have the Saints there with a lot of people in the neighborhood. You know what I mean? Not a Tulane issue, neighborhood issue.
It is, and it's, and you know what? Maybe this is a dry run opportunity to see, okay, this is going to be on a Friday night at 7 o'clock. You're going to have people getting out there a little bit earlier than that to get in line. What's it going to do to the parking situation? Maybe this opens the door to it because, again, you consider what the parking situation is at Tulane. They're very landlocked. They do have garages. They do have some flat spaces. But obviously what they have to do to execute a home game on a Saturday when you're getting perhaps 30,000 people in there, it's a challenge. And this may open the door to be able to allow some of those high schools to come in there on weeks that Tulane's on the road.
Yeah, that's it. I'd say 5 a year would be plenty, but get prime games, you draw extremely well, and it would be good for the university. For business, they'd make money, and, of course, they'd get exposure to top programs on their own campus in a nice facility. Just saying. And, of course, the Saints and the Texans on Sunday. And, Lenny, I guess last but not least, the biggest thing there would be there's so many roster spots in my mind still to be decided. I think as many as 5 to 10 spots still unclear in terms of positions. Who's going to make it at wide receiver? Who's going to make it defensive line? Who's going to make it in the secondary? Injuries playing a large part there. Linebacker, certainly. Backup quarterback, and who's the kicker?
A lot of things to be decided. I think you got to look at 2 elements of this. One, you've got the lineup and who's going to be in your rotation on a regular basis. And then, like you mentioned, you got the back end in terms of the last few spots on the 53. The thing to watch as you watch the game Sunday, watch special teams, because that is the thing, especially with those defensive players, that is the thing that's going to decide those last spots. If somebody excels on special teams, or you're seeing them out there with the quote-unquote starters in special teams, and maybe they're a guy you think is questionable in terms of a roster spot, that could be a sign that they're going to be on that 53.
I think that's a tipping point, as well as if a guy doesn't come in until late in the third quarter or early in the fourth quarter, that's another thing to watch for in his position in terms of depth charts moving forward. So Game 3 plays more like a regular season game than any other. Take it with a grain of salt. It is still, after all, practice. It's preseason.
Yeah, we're talking about practice. Come on. But it is what it is. Until it starts for real 2 weeks from Sunday, we're talking about practice.
All right, that's it. That's our First NBC Bank weekend preview, brought to you by First NBC Bank, with 35 locations throughout the greater New Orleans area and beyond. That's First NBC Bank. Oh, by the way, coming up next week on Tuesday, the debut 2015 77th year of the Greater New Orleans Quarterback Club. This year, the Greater New Orleans Sports Foundation Quarterback Club. The Sports Foundation sponsoring behind it. Big time effort. More people coming. First meeting will be a blockbuster with Dennis Lauscher, the president of the New Orleans Saints, Joe Oliva, the athletic director at LSU, J.T. Curtis as well, Jay Cicero, Brandon McNeil from Tulane. Really looking forward to that on Tuesdays now, each and every Tuesday during the football season at 12:15. That's 12:15 p.m., a few minutes later, to allow for Tulane folk to make it. So we look forward to that too.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. And one other thing we want to tease, coming up on the site, of course, Saturday, the 10th anniversary of the landfall of Hurricane Katrina. Brian Alley Walsh with a terrific story to close out our month-long Dome at 40 series, going back with Doug Thornton on the events of August 29th, 2005, and the process to come back and get that building ready, a remarkable process to come back and get that building ready in 13 months for that great night in September of 2006 that we all remember against the Falcons.
And we hope you'll look back at the previous 4 stories, because the documentation is all there. And years from now, it's something to look back at and reflect on in amazing fashion about what has happened on Poydras Street, dating back to August of 1975. Lenny, as always, a pleasure. Have a great weekend.
All right, we'll see you Monday.
That's our First NBC Bank weekend preview, brought to you by First NBC Bank, with 35 locations throughout Southeast Louisiana and the Florida Panhandle, and growing. That's First NBC Bank, proud sponsor of SportsNOLA.com. He's Lenny. I'm Kenny. Have a great weekend, and God bless you.